Welcome back to my mental health and crime channel. My name is Huda London. Please like, share, subscribe if you enjoy the contents in this channel. Today I'd like to speak about the Idaho quadruple murders that took place in Moscow, Idaho on the 13th of November 2022. Brian Christopher Koberger was charged with 4 counts of murders, quadruple murder, and robbery. He was arrested on the 31st of December 2022 and charged with these brutal murders. To start with, this is for entertainment purpose only. I'd like to start by thanking all my subscribers, my viewers, for your pleasant comments. Mindful, respectful comments. I can't thank you all enough for that. I really respect each of my viewers and subscribers' opinions, and I really appreciate and want to thank you all for keeping it mindful, professional, respectful. I'm just blessed to have good people on my channel. Once in a while you get trolls, but I guess that is part of life, that we just have to deal with it. This case is a very heartbreaking case, a high-profile case too. This case is sealed with gag orders, one gag order, and then another gag order to seal the first gag order, then another third one to seal the previous one. It's just baffling. I believe that transparency is really important. Although I've got my education from mental health, not from law and crime, which I really respect, mental health. So I can't sit here and pretend to know everything or anything about law. That's not my department. Forensic ain't my department either. We don't have any forensics people on YouTube that I've seen of, none, with a completed degree. So honestly, I wouldn't even know where to go to get forensic help in this case. But I can talk about the mental health of this case, the psychological thoughts, the way I see it, what my thoughts are about in this case, and that puzzles me always in this case. Let's not forget, the FBI have criminological profiles that they make of the suspect. Now, when you make a criminological profile of someone, or you study someone or analyze someone, I'm sure it's the criminological behaviors profiles that they're creating. The people who are doing this in the FBI have a lot of psychology and mental health skills, techniques, education, I would assume. Because creating a profile isn't easy, and you can get it wrong. We are not perfect. We wouldn't know. By just creating a profile doesn't mean you're 100% right. Because actually thinking about it, this I can speak out of confidence because I'm a mental health counselor, a CBT counselor. I believe to create a profile of a person, I could understand if you were doing therapy with the person. You would know their thoughts and where their thoughts lead to, and certain kind of behaviors when they seem to get irritated or aggressive and all, because they're telling you themselves. Mostly people come clean out in therapy because they want to get better themselves. So they tell you their behaviors, and then you try and work out and figure out with the person how they can control their negative automatic thoughts, negative behaviors. And then we try to teach them that, cognitive, if you use a cognitive test as a CBT therapist, CBT is proved to be a scientifically proven therapy, one of the best therapies in the world. I'm not saying this because I'm a CBT therapist, but I have used CBT on myself. I've used it on my clients. I've studied CBT. I've heard of people who have experienced going through CBT as their therapy, and I've heard at least 85% of people saying that they really enjoy CBT, and that the CBT techniques has helped them up to today. And I really get joy of hearing that. Mental health is something that is really important. Just like our physical health, well-being, mental health is as important. The sad thing is mental health is still not properly skilled. It's still underdeveloped. We still really need to work hard on mental health because we still haven't got there. A lot of researches are conducted. They're still being conducted, but it's still not enough to get us there. Because mental health started from the 60s, 70s, 80s. And now in the 2000s, especially after 2012, 13, especially 2015, I'm seeing people actually putting more into mental health. Every government needs to put more into mental health. I always say that because I personally believe there would be less crimes if there was more mental health services, more mental health therapy around, although we cannot make mental health therapy or psychiatrist evaluation, we cannot make it mandatory unless a person is a danger to themselves or danger to society. But when you look at not mass murders, when you even look at a police stop, just say for your DUI, or a normal police stop, and then they turn around and see that the person actually has mental health problems, and they don't know how to enter the situation or how to tackle the situation because they're dealing with a vulnerable person who may be acting aggressive. So sometimes they find the easiest way out is usually not the best way. They just shoot down the person. But isn't that wrong? Isn't that wrong? The government puts our tax money into other things that are sometimes important or that are not that important. Why can't they put it into mental health? Why can't they add mental health fundings, make mental health work hand in hand with the police? I'm not saying we're not trained. We're trained as mental health counselors. We're not trained as the police. But if there was mental health counselors who could go along with the police and be in a safe place, but they could actually be the negotiator, trying to talk to the person, if that makes sense. Not being the negotiator, but trying to advise the police or talk to the police and explain to them, yeah, okay, this person is having a bipolar. It seems like going to the notes, going to the journal, this person is literally having a mental health breakdown, and we think it's safe for the family, for the person's well-being, and for the society if we take the person to the hospital, to the mental health emergency department, and let a psychiatrist get to see the person. That could be helpful. Even in domestic violence cases, I'll give you a very good example. If in the case of Gabriela Vino Petito, if Gabby got that access to mental health counselors, I promise you, the situation would have been much different. Gabby Petito would have been alive, and Brian and her could have been separated there. They could have called Gabby's parents to come and assess Gabby's situation, and knowing how loving her four set of parents, her step parents and her biological parents are, I'm sure they would have taken her home. Maybe even Brian Koberger's parents would have taken him home, and they would have spoken to their children in a calm way. These are not children, these are young adults, and found a solution and got them maybe even professional therapy. But what happened that day, that was a typical domestic violence case that was going wrong. Many people blame the police for that. I don't blame the police. I blame the government. They should add more money. I don't blame, what's it called? That was a Moab. Yeah, Moab, Utah. I don't blame them. That is a small police force that don't know how to deal with a situation like that. And they're human beings. They assessed a situation quickly, and it turned out to be not in the most beneficial way for anyone. It turned out to be a disaster. The two young people, one murdered the other, unlived the other person, and the other one killed himself, unlived himself after that. So if you'll understand the example that I'm trying to give you, why mental health counselors and mental health nurses, mental health professionals should be working with the police in certain cases, especially in the United States, because you all have a bigger population and because you carry guns. And sometimes you'll have mad people, I really hate to say that, carrying guns, and that may not end up to be well. So mental health is important in every case. And now coming to this case, I always sit and talk about the grub truck, the Banfield. I hear people saying that different things. I hear people say conspiracies or whatsoever. Take it as you want. I believe there's something in those two. And then later on, the same people who talk about the same thing end up copying whatever I speak about, so it doesn't make sense. But coming back to what I personally think, Banfield, stop, and the grub truck gave me, in fact, a lot of insights for me. It gave me a lot of insight. I saw Greek life, these sororities and fraternities on the worst behavior, in the grub truck especially, laughing at two young girls who were intoxicated. You have an adult man like Joe Vito himself thinking it's funny to make fun of young victims who were intoxicated and who died in a brutal manner. The reason I point that out is, mind you all, Mr. Joe Vito made that interview after the girls were unlived. He was still laughing. He was still calling them in. I'm using the word intoxicated. I'm being decent. He kept on saying they were drunk. He said zombies. He used so much language. It really hurts me to my core to hear people talking about deceased people like that. And it really hurts me to my core when I hear people misusing mental health terms like antisocial personality disorder, calling them psychopaths, and trying to diagnose people for something that they don't have the skills to be diagnosing. Even a psychiatrist who's the one who diagnoses mental health illness would tell you that we need effective therapy. That's where counseling comes in. Effective therapy, effective medication, effective assessments to diagnose people. A psychiatrist won't just sit and guess and listen to your bit and say, oh, he comes under the line of bipolar. Oh, no, he comes under the line of antisocial personality or borderline personality or bipolar, name it. You can't do that. It takes a couple of months. if not years, to diagnose someone and give them the right diagnosis. That's why there's so much false diagnosis going on. So when I come to this case of the Idaho quadruple murders, it's just so much for me, because honestly, and I'm going to be frank today and tell you all my opinions. Brian Christopher Kohlberger, according to me, could be very involved in this case. I've always said that because the FBI has profilers. The FBI have studied the work. And sometimes they're human beings, they can go wrong. But mostly they know what they're talking about. So if his phone pinged, and if his phone was switched off for a couple of hours while the murders were happening, those are reasonable questions to think about. Definitely. You can't have many things turning out to go in one direction. So Brian Christopher Kohlberger, his alibi doesn't make sense. I know he doesn't have to give an alibi, if that makes sense. But he's not trying to convince us. He's not entitled to convince us, but he doesn't even know what his alibi was. I love to drive. Guess what? You were driving in front of a house where murders occurred. You had a quadruple murder that happened there, so it doesn't cut it to say, oh, I like to drive. Brian Christopher Kohlberger had a reason to be there. And what was the reason? Only he knows. He must have had a reason, but what we want to know is what was his explanation of being there. Does he know one of the victims? Does he know one of the surviving roommates? It is important to find out what brought this man to King's Road, or King Street, like it's called. But besides Brian Christopher Kohlberger, I would like to know what was happening that night. Because everyone's just focused on Brian. What was happening that night with the other students? Because let's say, if I per se, this is how I think. If I per se believe Brian Christopher Kohlberger did it, fair enough, he did, let's say that. Then that still leaves one thing. There will be a bad conscience on my mind will be left. That if I'm saying Brian Christopher Kohlberger did it, that means all the people, not all the people, most of the people that are pointing my fingers to in the grub truck are all innocent. How about that? Is that what I'm willing to say? No. It can't be a coincidence with all the surveillance going on in the grub truck. That's why I prefer to say that I believe Brian Christopher Kohlberger is involved somehow. I've always said that. I would never go around saying that Brian is innocent. And I won't go around saying Brian is guilty. I would rather go around saying I need to know more before I accuse him guilty. Because things are not pointing out that he did it for me. Sometimes they do point out that he's involved, but not that he did this by himself. Whoever did this quadruple murders, I personally believe, is a sociopath. A couple of sociopaths did it. I'll tell you why. I thought of it. It's not good to label, and I'm not labeling anyone, but I'll tell you why. A psychopath is more calculated. Not all of them, but most of them. They wouldn't go do a sloppy crime like this. A psychopath is very calculated. He would be stalking victims to see when they sleep, what time they do what. And when people say, oh, he was down there to find out and he's been there 12 times to find out how they live and what they do. No. I personally don't believe that. Because if Brian Christopher Koberger just say did this, and he has, like many people who say psychopath, incel, I've heard many things. Let's say he's a psychopath. He has many traits of that I can say, okay, I can check him on this, check. Yes, narcissistic, because I've heard from many people allegedly that he argues a lot and he likes to be always right. He likes his voice to be most heard. Take. Yes. But then we have to continue the list. When psychopaths do murders like this, we've seen of many serial killers and psychopaths, you don't see them taking such stupid, hopeless chances like getting into a house. Look at their criminology. Make a criminology profile of them. What would make a person who has a PhD education, who has everything to lose, who's worked so hard for his education, to think that he can get away with quadruple murders by going into a full house? He chose the most difficult house more than other houses in Idaho. He chose a house where it's supposed to be called a party house. He chose a house that is next to the fraternities. He chose a house that is a crowded place, near students, neighbors close by approximatities, if you look at it. Look at this. Are we trying to say that Brian Christopher Koberger knows that there's a dog in the house, knows that there are 6 or 5 roommates? One did not, allegedly. That's another important question that I want to discuss about the 6th roommate. So there's 5 roommates, there's a dog,